This time on Captain Castle's Laboratory, we're going to be working on the Black Cat Cafe from Department 56. The cat, the eyes don't light up anymore. They're burned out. I've seen people ask how you replace them. I don't know, so we're going to figure it out together. So, taking a gander at this, I see this separates, and then there's your power. So, all I've done so far is cut the glue seam right there. You can see the seam, just to see if I can see what's inside, where you can see the base, because I can't get this out. But once you cut the glue seam, you can get it out, because that squared notch fits inside here. You could probably just cut one side and then like a C and slide it off. So that's about as far as I've gotten as far as how this thing comes apart to replace the eyeballs. I can't see any easy way of doing this. So I can just say, hey, you do this, this, and this, and you're done. No, not on this. This was definitely a piece that once it was broke, it's broke forever is the way it looks. But, speaking of butt, there's a seam that runs all the way this way through the fur, and then all the way this way through the fur, all the way around. So this is two pieces then stuck together, and then they flock it with black flocking. It's probably nylon material. It's plastic feeling. Because the only thing I can see is to literally cut this seam all the way around. You can see the seam goes through the connection for the pin for the 2.5 millimeter jack. That seam then follows up into the plastic right there. And then if you pull the fur back, the seam continues. So let's see if that's the way to do this. That's the only way I can see. Sharp razor knife, X-Acto, whatever you have. And we're going to see if we can separate this seam. I'm going to start in the black plastic, just because the seam is larger, so I can get the knife in there easier. And I can open it. I'm not going to cut into the white plastic yet. I'm hoping the white plastic doesn't require any cutting, that it's just the casting around this piece and it's not attached inside. Or it's not attached to the whole thing. And it looks like it is. Just the casting for the wire itself. So, we've now cut the plastic up to the fur, and it does open, and you might be able to see, probably not, there's a lip right here where, same as this lip, is clamping onto this plastic. So the plastic for the 2.5 millimeter jack is just held in place by the plastic at the bottom. See? It's the same plug-in that you would plug into this back of your house if you had a 3-volt accessory, like this. There's one right here. So you see these serrations? That's them right there. So this is literally sticking out like that. So if you break this, you can just use one of these and cut it. This is the battery box from a 3-volt Department 56 piece. That way you can cut this piece off and use this wire for other accessories that you want to run off of the 3-volt stuff. Anyway, let's see if we can continue with this. Let's see if we can follow it through the fur. There's no guarantees you're not going to see the fur damage. So, like I said, I've never done this one. I see lots of people dealing with it this past year. I had this, I started filming it, that's why that was pre-cut. And then the footage got, the file got corrupted. So, instead of starting from scratch, because I already cut it, we'll just start from where I left off and tell you what I did. just using the screwdriver to hold it open so I could see the seam better. There we go. So that was glued to one side. It was glued to the front, of course, because that's the side where the lights are. I'm going to try and follow this through the fur. That's where it's going to get a little hairy. No pun intended. I'm going to have to use a screwdriver again to keep it open so I can see the seam. It's hard to see the seam because of the fur. I'm not sure if you damage the fur, if there's black flocking you can use to fix it. Kind of like the grass and like the woodland scenic flocking. I don't know if they have something similar for other, because black's not a very, sorry if I'm off camera, I'm trying to look at it closely. Black's not a common flock color, not that I've seen. This is definitely glued. I can see the glues, but it is really hard to cut through. And this is a brand new blade. The front is cutting easier than the back. It's interesting. It's also concerning. Why is one side easier than the other? Is it not following the seam? Am I cutting through anything important? I'm trying to follow the seam. It's hard, again, hard to see the seam with the fur. If you try this yourself, you'll have the same issue, I assume. All the cats look similar. Let's see if I can get the back some more. Also, I'm afraid of breaking the tail because I'm trying to put my thumb on it. There we go. Now she's cutting. Also, I'm trying not to go too deep with the razor knife because I have no idea where the wires are. Looks like the wires are split. So what I can see in here, I don't know if you'll be able to see it very well. Nope. Go back to this black piece here. So they have the wires separated. This is just zip cord. You can peel it apart. So right above the factory strain relief, the two wires split. And then right in the middle is a bulge, because they have one wire going up the front legs and one wire going up the back leg. That bulge is the casting where the feet meet. So yeah, it's going to be a little interesting. Instead of running the wires in one direction, they split it, probably because of room. You know, if there's no room, you can't run them on the same side. And there might be a resistor in here, I don't know. So that's why I'm trying to cut shallow and carefully. Because Halloween's coming up here in 5 months. And I'm sure this person would like their Halloween piece back. They've had this since last Halloween. They weren't in a rush. They said whenever you get it done, you get it done. And I'm just trying to figure out how to do it without damaging. So in between other projects, I stare at it and I've been contemplating. And I just said, screw it, we're going to have to cut the thing in half. But I don't know what's inside. So. Yeah, sorry, it's off camera. I'm holding it against my body while I'm prying. Again, it can be hard to see. You can see how the wire split. But apparently this is going to be the only way to open these little cats. It's not something I'm going to want to do a lot of, I'll tell you that. A couple of reasons. I don't know what I'm cutting into yet. I won't know till I open it. And then two, if you slip, and it's a nice sharp razor blade, you're going to cut yourself. You're supposed to, as they say, cut towards your chum, not your thumb. But unfortunately, things like this where you're trying to get leverage, you have to cut towards your thumb. I've explained this to different like woodworkers and stuff that say you're doing it wrong. I'm like, yep, apparently I am. And yes, you can slip, and yes, you can cut yourself, but there are certain things that you just can't. You can't get the leverage, and you can't get the stability. And since I'm literally cutting into the unknown, I'd like the stability. So I've got most of the seam cut. Now I'm just using a screwdriver, because it's a little thinner than a spudger, to break the additional glue that's farther inside. Because this thing is fully potted. There we go. So I just haven't cut the seam across his back, or her back, or its back. There we go. Let's cut through the head. So here we go. So there's our insides. So I did cut through the wire, which is what I was afraid of doing. Right there. There's a nice sharp diagonal slice. So, and you can see what I'm talking about, how they split the wire down each side. But not a problem, it's all fixable. I'm just going to separate the back half from the front half just to make it easier to work on. There's just a little bit of resin left on the tail. So that's the glue. So there's the back. There's the front. Two different plastics. You can see where I went off of the resin. So the white is the white and the blue is the blue. So the glue is between the two, and you can see where I, because of the fur, I went out of the angle. So now that we're in here, I don't see any resistors. All I see is thin wire and two lights that are probably put in parallel. These should be like 3 millimeters. And at this point, you could change the color. So if you don't want the orange, you can make them red or blue or green or whatever, or put them back to orange. Now just remember, whatever color you choose, even if it's the original, it's not going to be the same shade. It's like paint. Once you mix one batch, the next batch won't be exactly the same. May not be visible to you, but usually there's a hue difference. Same thing with LEDs. The different age ones will have different hues from the newer ones. So here's the eye assembly. Again, sorry if I'm off camera. The camera's a foot and a half in front of me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean the old stuff out of here. Or try to. These are really good resin. And especially in this track, I need to get the insulation out that's stuck down by the glue, and I'll have to dig out the heat shrink where they attach the thin wire to the wire from the 2.5 millimeter jack. Because if I don't, I won't be able to get the new one in because the wire won't have enough space, because there is really little space in here. There we go. That's a little better. There's, like I said, not a lot of room in here, so you got to make sure your channels are clean. So here's the glue they used. This edge right here is glue. It looks like a hot melt glue, but it's probably a resin, liquidy resin glue, because it's still rubbery in feel, but it's not peeling like a hot glue. But you can see the track that everything fits in. So they sandwich it together and then go. And the eyes, they were just glued in. I was cutting on the heat shrink so I can see if there's a resistor in here. It doesn't feel like there is, but I'm still going to check. So they have the negatives tied together, so it is in parallel, meaning the resistors, both hots and both negatives, are attached to the hots and the negative respectively, and not a hot to negative and a hot to negative. There we go. Now I got the heat shrink off. So there is no resistor. It's just the lights wired together. And that might be one of the reasons why it failed, because if your power supply puts more power than these can handle, they'll pop. These LEDs are burnt. So when you look inside an LED, it's going to be really hard to see on camera. You see how the center is kind of darker? That's where it burned. This one is worse than this one. This one's bad on the backside. So it's just how the little wire that lights up pops. So these got hot. So there could have been a power surge, like the transformer, instead of putting out 3 volts, put out 4, something like that. So there's no resistor on here to protect those lights. You can put one in there, but anything you put in there is going to make them dimmer. So just be aware. These are kind of yellowish orange, if I remember right. It's been a while since I've seen them light up. And a lot of people are like, oh, you can look them up online. Yeah, the problem with looking them up online is the color on your computer or phone can throw off the perspective, and of course the thing that's recording it will do the same. So, have yellow, which is close. You can see it's brighter. I have clear yellow, meaning that that's the eyes would look clear until you turn it on. Where's my LED tester? Oh, that one's blue. I don't know why that one's there. Let's grab another one. Put blue in there if you want. That one's blue too. So apparently I don't have them in the correct color order. There's supposed to be a little piece of paper on top of each one. Tells me the color. That's strobe. Definitely don't want strobing eyes. That'd be very intense. Orange. Yeah, look at that. Here's orange. And it's the clear style. Here's yellow. Let me turn off a little light here. Maybe the light's making it so you can't tell the color very well. Yeah, it's just swamping out the camera. So let's cover it. There's the orange. And there's the yellow. I'm thinking the yellow is going to look better because the yellow has an orange hue to it. Orange. And like I said, it's really close to the color of the lens that's here. This lens could be darker because they're burnt. One of those things. Now, if you were to put a resistor in here, I would put in a couple of ohms, 10 at the most. So like a 3 ohm, 4 ohm resistor. And it'd have to be a small quarter watt or eighth watt to fit inside of this shell. So, hoping this channel's clean enough. So I'm going to go with the yellows, and on an LED, the longer lead is the positive, shorter lead's a negative. If you trim both leads and you don't know which is which, you can use a little battery to test it at 1.5, 2 volts. Or if you put on a set of magnifiers, the negative, so the LED is a cylinder, but there's a flat spot right above the negative on the ring. You see there's a lip. So on these little guys, I need to use a magnifier to see it. On the bigger ones, they're pretty obvious. But so there's two indicators of polarity. Metal leg, and the lens is shaped flat on the negative side. So on this, normally the wires are marked based on the length. So go back to this real quick. You can kind of see the long stripe and then the short stripe. Long stripe's positive, short stripe's negative. This would have it too if it was longer than 1/2 inch. So with it still connected, the black wire is the negative, and I'm going to cut it off because it's all messy and stuff. So I'm going to take a Sharpie or a marker. Here's a black one. And I'm going to, just to make it easier for me, so I don't have to sit there and do a polarity check. Negative. I've had a red marker to put it there. But that wasn't the first one I grabbed. The first one I grabbed was blue. The second one was black. But that way I have a mark that says negative. Because this wire is damaged right there. I got it with the razor blade. And of course, I don't like this connection. This one's broke, and then you can see this connection's right here. Kinda. Again, the small stuff is hard to see on camera. So I'm going to replace it with some thin wire. Let me see, is this wire the same thickness? It is. So this is LED wire. It's a really small gauge that came out of a Avon piece. And I kept them for the lights, but at the same token, these wires are the same thickness of these wires. I don't care what the color is. The blue insulation will conduct as much electricity as the black insulation. So I just know if I use the blue for the black and the white for the red, or hot and negative, it doesn't matter. It's because of my standard LED wire, it's too thick. All my standard LED wire is too thick, so I have some of this extra thin stuff. You can buy it in a spool or a roll, or whatever Amazon calls it. It's usually like 10 or 12 feet, and it's usually just a few dollars. But you need to make sure it's the thinner stuff, because they do tell you the diameter of the wire or the gauge. If I remember right, this is 18 or 20 gauge, because the standard LED wire I have is 16 gauge. So you can kind of see the thickness difference. This is too thick to fit in this channel. So you have to be very aware of wire size. You can use varnished wire, or wire that's covered in lacquer. Normally you'd find that on stuff like this. This will work. It's also the stuff they use for fairy lights. So if you have some fairy lights that are broke, you can cut a section out to fix this. Because this has a lacquer on it, which prevents it from arcing when it's wrapped around a coil, like so. So that works too, and it'll work fine for these eyes. And that's even thinner, so it'll fit really good in the track. You just don't want to scratch it, because if you scratch it, you remove the lacquer or varnish, and if they touch each other, you have a short. So I'm just going to use sections of this. There we go. So that's cleaned up. I now have two fresh copper ends. You can also put heat shrink on this when you put it back in. I don't know why they did, since it's literally split. They're not going to touch each other, but you have to make sure your heat shrink's really thin. So again, you have to be aware of your sizes. You can also use liquid electrical tape, or even glue. Good old-fashioned glue will insulate it too. I'm going to see how it fits, because again, they're isolated, one on each side. They're not going to touch each other. Oh. The soldering iron is now heating up. We'll get that thing fired up and ready to go. Now with this thinner stuff, when you strip it, it does have a tendency of breaking, so be very aware. The fairy wire or the lacquered wire is the same. When you strip it or clean it, you can break it. Normally you can just get the tip of the wire hot with the soldering iron and melt the varnish right off. You don't have to worry about it. Sometimes though, I've had it where that doesn't work, and yeah, you have to scratch it with a knife or a piece of sandpaper. So the first thing we're going to do is tin the wire. Like so. Now, on the factory lights, they had the leads cut about 2/3 was left. So we'll I'm going to leave them long and then trim them if I need to. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push them in to the eye socket, and I'm going to turn them so the leads are parallel to the edge of the cat. There we go. Push it into the eye socket. There we go. And I'm going to put the positive next to the positive on this one, since they're literally going to cross each other. Apparently I have some crap in here that fell in. His eye is closed, and that's because I got some plastic from cutting. Now it's in his fur. There we go. So with the little screwdrivers, I'm pushing between the two leads on the plastic casing of the LED to push it in square so I'm not breaking the leads. And there you go. You can see the reflection. So his eyes are back in. So first things first, I'm going to take the two positives and I'm going to fold them down. And then I'm going to take the negatives and fold it the other direction. So I am going to have to put heat shrink across this, at least this guy here, so that way it doesn't touch the positives as it lays across. There is a small gap, but thermal expansion contraction means it could touch. So we're going to find a very, very small piece, small diameter, I guess I should say. Length isn't as important as the diameter of the hole. Here's a smaller one. There we go. So this green, the diameter really small. Cut it. I'm going to slide it onto the negative. So. And then I'm going to solder the negative to the negative and the positive to the positive right now, so that they're bonded. The heat generated by the soldering iron will probably melt the edge of the heat shrink, which is totally fine. It's got to get melted. It technically doesn't, but it should get melted. Here we go. The heat shrink is captive, so it's not going to go anywhere, because you can use the heat gun or a heat pen or a lighter to melt it, but the issue with that is now we have fur, and the fur is going to melt or possibly catch fire. So just making it captive is fine. You can also take your soldering iron and rub it against the heat shrink and it'll melt it. I don't like doing that because it does stuff like that where it leaves the solder onto the heat shrink. You have to clean your tip really good. So I'm not a big fan of doing that. I watch a lot of people online do that. I just don't like it because it always leaves smears. And if the solder iron melts through, you now have a hole and you have a potential spot for shorting or grounding, which we don't want. There we go. So now the positive and the negative are connected. I'm going to cut off the little bit here of the positive. Negative, I think I'm going to leave the longer piece just because it's fine. Now, before we run everything, let's make sure both LEDs work, because I only tested one, and that's not normal. We're supposed to test both. Also, let's see how the color looks on camera. So we're going to fire this up. I want to set it a little low, so I'm going to set it 2.5 volts. Here you go. I might put a resistor in here. It's kind of funny that one eye is darker than the other. Oh, I think one of the LEDs is about to pop. Did you connect? Here we go. Yeah, I'm going to have to put a resistor in here. So this gets fed 3 volts, and at 2.5 volts, I'm overdriving the LEDs. They're changing colors. At 2 volts, I have a nice even color. It's flickering because the clamp isn't grabbing, so I'm holding it with my finger. So let's get out a resistor bucket and put in, since there's plenty of room right here, I can put a little resistor in right here. Underdriving LEDs will give you a longer duration of life on the LED. A lot of these little miniature houses overdrives the LEDs, meaning the LED is rated for 3 volts and they're driving it at 3 volts. If you drive it at 2.8 or 2.7, 2.6, etc., the LED will last longer because you're not putting as much power to it. It's like a car. If you drive with the hammer floored all the time, you're going to get, well, less mileage, but you'll also get a worn out engine, transmission, brakes, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and solder up the positive. I'm going to put the resistor on the negative. The resistor doesn't care where it goes, so I'm just re-tinning it to make sure I have a good connection. Because I'm going to have to pause it to find my resistor bucket. Actually, I know where it is. It's on the bottom of a stack. So I'm going to probably pause it anyway just so I can dig out the stack. You don't have to listen to all the noise. So there we go. And look, the wire fits right inside that groove. So that's good. Now, give me a moment. I'm going to go find my resistors. We'll figure out the resistor value real quick, and then we'll put it together. And then we'll solder this on, and we'll see if it stays lit with it clamped here. I have the house to plug it in the top, but the top piece is broke, so I have to fix that first before I can plug it into the house. But I can at least use my machine to make the eyes light up. The top piece unscrews, and it's just got 2 wires soldered to it. One of the wires broke off. I have to fix that. Not that hard to do. But anyway, give me a moment. I'm going to go find some resistors. We're going to put a resistor in here, get you the value, put this on, make sure it works, then figure out how we're going to re-stick this thing back together. But anyway, be back in just a moment. Okay, I'm back. I went ahead and got the house ready. I put this back in. This is a pain. If you ever have to take it out, you're going to need something that you can hold it in place while you screw this back on, because the centerpiece falls straight in. So this is a fishing hook removal tool. I put some black heat shrink over it so it doesn't bow and less likely to scratch anything as I stick it inside. But anyway, and I also tested the voltage. So it's plugged into the 3-volt adapter, and it bounces between 3 and 3.5 volts up here. So these LEDs right here are designed for 2.2 to 2.5 volts. 3.5 will cause them to burn out. They'll get dimmer and dimmer and then turn black. So that's probably what happened to the original ones right over there. So doing Ohm's law, it says it should be right around 100 ohms, a little over, at 3 volts. But since this is bouncing to 3.5 volts, yeah, we're not going to go that. Also, I told you about underdriving the LEDs so they last longer. So you don't have to do this as much. So this is a 200 ohm resistor. My machine set at 3. We'll bounce it up to 3.5. So that's the max that the power was putting out. And we still have a good color. So this is an 1/8 watt resistor. I buy resistor packs, so there's 10,000 or 5,000, or small ones are 1,000 resistors altogether. It's hard to buy them individually. But if you have some lying around, the color code looks to be red, black, 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 brown. It's hard to see because it's on the blue background. The colors bleed. So this is what I'm going to use, since this is probably the reason why these burned out, is I bet you these 3-volt adapters are failing because of their age, and they're failing to where they're putting out too much power. So this is a 3-volt adapter and it's putting out 3.5 volts. Now the LED that's in here, or these LEDs didn't have a problem because they're on a circuit board. Circuit board's absorbing some of that extra power. The incandescent light that's in here, the little 3-volt light, if you unscrew that, that's when it spikes to 3.5 continuously. And that might have been what happened with this, is that light burned out because I just replaced it because the original one was burned out. And when that burned out, this spiked. There is no resistor inside the house to this port. So there's nothing to stop a voltage spike from frying the eyes on your cat. So that's a bad thing. But we can fix it. The whole point of this channel is to fix it. So I cut one lead short, so I can just solder it right here. And I could almost have left it long and maybe had it run all the way down. You know what, I'm gonna grab another one. Ugh. This is no longer on the bottom. Let's see if a long one will reach and I don't have to use that other piece of wire. When you buy a resistor packs, they do not come in a case like this. This is just a hobby case I bought and then separated them, make it easy. Yeah, actually it might reach the entire way without using that piece of wire, which I think is under the house, that I cut. Yeah, it's right here. I'm all about not adding more stuff than I need to, so I'm going to set that aside just to be safe for now. And we're going to see what we can do. First thing I'm going to do is tin the LEDs. Now I'm going to tin the resistor. And then I'm going to solder it together. Of course, I was moving so much stuff. I don't know where I put the... There it is. This. So it'll go in this way because the negative is on the back. It slides in just like that. So they have a notch that matches these grooves, and if you put it in the bottom groove, I think it's going to be too long. Where's the base? So it sticks out too far. So we put it in the, well, excuse me, the top groove will make it too long, and the bottom groove makes it just right. So it's like Goldilocks, except we'll call it copper since we're dealing with copper. So I'm just going to set it in here to get an approximate measurement of what I need. So I'm not going to trim the resistor. The resistor lead is the appropriate length, so we're going to tin it. Then we're going to tin the wire here. It stops moving on me. And then if you have a set of helping hands, it might come in handy. I do. I'm just not going to get them out. I'm just going to use all the stuff on my bench to hold it in place for me. Go. And set her back in so I can approximately bend the lead to where it needs to be, and then we'll work on the positive. So here we go. You can see it just sits there in his butt. And then positive, need to trim right about here. And we need to strip off some insulation. trimmed it a little longer than I need. I need to strip off a little more insulation. That'll work perfectly. So now we need to tin these. And then any excess wire I can just snip off once it's soldered, because it'll stick up. Also, once it's soldered, it'll be rigid wire, because it is stranded. Stranded wire is harder to cut when it's just individual strands all sitting out there. There we go. Now we'll bond them. I'm going to use something that won't burn my fingers. And a little bit of excess we just snip right off. And there is the new cat's eyes. So I'm not going to glue the back on yet. Also, I'm not sure how I'm going to glue it. I could use a little bit of hot glue, a little bit of super glue. I'm not going to use resin glue. Resin glue would be almost a permanent forever fix. Let's plug this thing in. So the lights, kill some lights. Let's see if this thing lights up. Oh, that's right. I don't have the back on it, so it puts a little extra. Gotta be careful with the force. Which is funny I said that because today is May the 4th. Although I'm not a big Star Wars fan, I'm a Spaceballs guy, so it's May the Schwartz be with you versus May the Force be with you. Kill a few extra lights in here so it's easier to see. Here we go. Camera should start to adjust in a second. It might adjust better when I step out of the way of the light behind me. It's still hard to see, but you can see the lights are flashing. You can see the 3-volt bulbs working, and look at those eyes. Those eyes are about the same intensity as these lights here. I'm going to turn on a light. Coming back. So these flashers are about the same intensity as those. And for some reason on the camera the eyes are pulsating, but in actuality they're not. So they must have a very mild flicker that the camera speed is picking up. Which makes sense, it's on the same circuitry as the flashing lights. So, there we go. Not the easiest, not the hardest. Now that you know how to do it, it shouldn't be too terribly difficult. We kill the power. What I did when I pushed it in is I forgot there's no back on it, and it popped out of the groove. So, next is basically glue it. I'm probably going to have to put this in a clamp overnight, just because you can see the gaps. It has to be held tight to keep it shut. So I am probably just going to put a little bit of super glue on here, and the reason I want to use super glue is it's a faster bond and you can crack it. Also, it's thin. The hot glue is thick, which means you might see the seam. But just holding it together, so if I hold it, you really can't see the seam for his tail, or its tail, or her tail. You can see the seam because I'm shining a light on it, but like if I hold this side, you really don't see the seam. You just see where I messed up the hair. So if I brush out the hair, so I'm going to use this with the brush, because this has the brush, and I'm going to hold it for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to put this on. And you really can't screw this one up, and the reason I say that is if you look at the shape, there's a cut corner, there's a cut corner. So you kind of sort of know how this fits in here. Perfect. But anyway, So on the Black Cat Diner, your eye is burned out, or eye burned out, because I see a lot of them, just one of them die. This is going to take you a little bit of time, probably not as long as this video. Shouldn't take you an hour, but you're going to need a sharp X-Acto knife, or what other brand you may use. I went with the curved blade, so because a sharp blade, if you stab it too hard, you could cut through something important, which I already did, which was the wires. But a curved knife, at least you also have better control and less likely of slippage, because you can watch the curve either be too deep or too shallow. And you're less likely to break the tip off inside, like on a pointy 45 degree or 70 degree knife. You're going to need wire, LEDs, probably a resistor, solder, glue, patience, and heat shrink. Not always necessarily in that order. But, so start with this. Just cut one side and see if you can open it like the letter C. Then slide it off. Don't cut the white, and then cut around the seam as close as you can. You're not going to be perfect. Nothing's perfect. And pry it apart carefully. Be careful of the tail. You can see right here where a little bit of the tuft of hair came off. It's not plastic. There's still hair. It's just thinner. It's really noticeable in the light, but when I come out of the light, you can't see it at all. There's the light shining off the plastic that the hair's stuck to. LEDs, whether it's one or both, replace them as a set, because they're going to be two different shades. These are 3mm yellow LEDs with a 200 ohm resistor, because this house is putting out too much power. And that's probably because the transformer in the wall socket's dying. The AC adapter, sorry, geez. You can try and get a new AC adapter, but I would still put something in here to limit the power. Makes the eyes a little dimmer, which I couldn't tell much of a difference. They're about the same intensity as these. And it helps protect this so you don't have to open this up again in the future. There is no protection on these lights. These lights are through a circuit board, which has resistors on it and other components to make it alternate to the flash. The circuit board will fry before you fry these lights. Circuit board fries, you're screwed. You can just wire these all together so they're just on. Makes it easier. This piece here, if the wire breaks off the bottom, which the only way that's going to really happen is if you catch it when you're changing out this light here, which is really easy to do because there's no glue in this one. There might be glue in yours to hold the wires out of the way. If there is, cool. If there's not, careful. You unscrew it here. You can see a little notch and a notch. And then as soon as you unscrew it, the center piece that this plugs into drops straight down. And your fingers, unless you're like Slender Man, you have long, thin fingers, you're not going to be able to hold that in because you can see how far in you have to go. So the fishing hook removal tool works great. A hemostat works pretty good. Articulating needle nose. So these are regular needle nose, so they just pivot in one spot. Articulating needle nose. That's what these are. They pivot in two. So this isn't as wide, so it fits up inside. This is overkill. This tip is bigger than the plastic, so that's why I chose the fish hook removers. They're like $9 or $10 on Amazon. And then, like I said, all I did was add a little heat shrink, which keeps the metal from separating because it does flex, and helps you from scratching or marring something as you're sticking it through. Because sometimes I stick it through the windows, and I don't want to chip the paint. So this thing stays together pretty good even without the glue. That's neat. So you don't need the heat shrink in here. To me, it's just a waste. You can see the separation. There's no way they're going to jump an arc. So the only heat shrink I use is right here, so the positive and the negative won't touch. There's no reason to put excess stuff in here. It's just not worth your time, patience, energy, and material. To me, it's just a waste of material. Apparently it flexed a little bit. There we go. I want to make sure that it's actually in its groove. So the brush at least allows a little control of where the glue goes, so I can get it on the ridge and not in its fur. If somebody finds this black fur or flocking, you can put it below for other people to see, just in case they need to reflock the cat. for some reason. There we go. So now I'm just gonna keep it squeezed in my hand for a minute, and then put that on, and this can go back to its owner once I fix their Krispy Kreme. They'll make the motor for that one. I think I found a motor. Gotta try it out. But anyhow, so black cat, moderate. Again, basic tools. Sharp razor knife. I prefer the curved for this one. If you have a pointy or weird shape, go for it. Just be careful you don't cut yourself. You're gonna need a glue or adhesive to put back together. I'm gonna use this. You can use what you like. Try not to use something like this. This is a lot more permanent, and you'll never get it back apart if you need to. I would recommend adding a resistor. Again, I'm putting in a 200 ohm, which is the one I originally cut, which I should have measured it first. I'll just put it back in the container. It's fine. Most resistors don't have the full length leads anyways. And then LEDs, I'll try and link all this stuff below. They're 3mm yellow. If you want to change them to orange or red, you can. You have it open. If you do, on the red, you'll have to change the resistor to something higher, maybe 300 ohms, because the red has a lower forward voltage than the yellow. Not by much, but it does have a lower forward voltage by almost a half a volt, which is an LED term. That's a lot of power. There we go. She's cured. No more flex. Cool. So all the people getting ready for Halloween, hopefully this will help you with your cafe, your diner, sorry, as far as getting it fixed. It's not the most exciting video, but it is a repair of something that last Halloween, 2024, I saw a lot of people commenting about their eyes burning out. And then it was right after Halloween that this was dropped off, and between everything else and staring at it, wasn't sure how to fix it. So figured, screw it, we'll do it today. She just wants it back by October. I'm like, cool, that's fine. My concern was damaging all the fur and then having some obvious seam line that you're going to see when you're done. Like you have to shave the cat or something. So, there we go. One last, so you know that it does work. There you go. So that'll conclude the Black Cat Diner by Department 56 on how to cut open your cat and remove its guts and replace it with new. Sounds like a really bad science experiment. But anyhow, hopefully this helps. Any comments or questions, leave them below. As far as if somebody finds the black flocking material to reflock the cat if it needs it, please link it below for other people to see. Luckily I don't need any, but you never know. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Till the next one.